What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the NFL predictions. We went 8-7 last week. We'll recap each game real quick. We had the Bengals over the Dolphins, and then we picked Colts over the Jaguars, but the Jaguars did win. We picked Texans over Titans. That did happen. We picked Patriots over Bills. Bills beat the Patriots. I believe it was 16-0 or was it 13-0, something like that. So we're 2-2 up to this point. We went 4-2 overall in the AFC games. We had the Raiders beating the Ravens. Actually, a lot better of a game than I expected score-wise. I have not went back and watched the game yet, but I will probably do that sometime soon because everybody said that it was a very good game. I just have not had the time to get around to doing that yet. And then the Steelers walloped the Chiefs. So we went 4-2 in AFC play. In AFC NFC play, we went 2-2. The Redskins over the Browns happened. The Seahawks did beat the Jets. Fitzpatrick had another rough outing. The Broncos beat the Buccaneers, and the Saints came back against the Chargers. Really should have gone 3-1 in that, but the Chargers yet again lose a game at the very end, and I could just never seem to get it right with this team. Whenever I pick against them, they lose at the end, and whenever I pick them, or whenever I pick against them, the one time I picked against them, they won, and then three times I picked against them, and they lose at the very end of the game, and it's horrible. So we went 2-2 there, and then here's where we really got killed is the NFC. I think we only got 2-3 in this. We picked the Panthers over the Falcons, and the Falcons pretty handily beat the Panthers. The Bears beat the Lions in a late comeback. That was actually one of the better games last week. I did watch that actually when it was on through Red Zone, and it was pretty good. The Rams beat the Cardinals, which was one of the bigger shocks of the week, but the Cardinals have been one of the biggest shocks of the season. Oh, also, I didn't mention I zoomed out my view so you guys can see the full standings instead of just we cut off the bottom on each side before. So that was a thing that I noticed when I went back and watched one of these old videos. So the Rams beat the Cardinals. The Cowboys beat the 49ers. That game really shouldn't have been that close, but the 49ers are a little frisky this year. And the Vikings beat the Giants. Overall, we went 8-7 in last week's guessing. And really quick, I'll pull up what I predicted to happen for this week. I started making them two different things so that the standings are reflective of where they actually stand at the beginning of the video. So here is I went back to week 1. All right, here are my week 5 picks. I have the Patriots over the Browns. I don't really think it's going to be that close, but if there's really a time for the Browns to win this year, it's probably going to be this week. Tom Brady just coming back, hasn't played in 4 games of actual NFL action. The preseason I don't really think is going to, it really doesn't matter. They're also favored by 10.5. The Patriots are, and I can see the Browns covering on this one because the Browns have a pretty good offense, honestly. Cody Kessler has not looked that bad. The Patriots defense hasn't been dominating by any stretch of the term, as I'm going to take a drink really quick. Cleveland's run game has been really strong this year. Isaiah Crowell is averaging, I think, 6 yards a carry, and Duke Johnson hasn't played a whole lot, but he's really good running back. Terrell Pryor's been fantastic. I think they still have Gary Barnidge. I don't really know what he's done this season, but he still is a pretty talented tight end. And their defense is really not that great, but I think that Brady's not really going to have that easy of a time coming out of the gate. I don't know if it's really going to be the easiest time for him right away. And I think that the Browns have a chance I think they're going to cover this game. But I think New England is going to win in the end, but I think it'll be pretty close, much like last week's Browns game. It was only I think a 10-point game at the end. But yeah, I'm going to pick the Patriots in that one. I got the Titans over the Dolphins, and this is one of those games that I really had to think about. And what kind of swayed me was the way that the Titans have played recently. They are a weird 1-3 because the first week was a stupid game because their offense gave up 2 defensive touchdowns. They beat Detroit, but the last 2 weeks they've lost by just a touchdown each time. So really they've been in all 4 games that they played. I mean, the first game ended up being a 9-point game, but they had a late comeback, and I think they failed to convert a 2-point, and that's why the score ended up as 16 and not 18 or 17. So they've really just lost the 3 games they've lost by only a touchdown. Miami's not very good. We saw last week on Thursday night. Well, I didn't see because I didn't watch the game, but people who watched the game on Thursday night saw that this team isn't very good. They might be honestly the worst team in the AFC, even worse than Cleveland because The only team they beaten this year is Cleveland, and they had overtime. They had to take the overtime to beat Cleveland. And I mean, they were in the game against Seattle, and they made the New England game was only a touchdown game, even though the Dolphins just made it was a garbage time comeback. And then they just got killed by Cincinnati last week. I don't think this team's very good. I think the Titans are actually a pretty talented team. Now, there is the malarkey factor, but the line is definitely something to look at. Even if you think that Miami is going to win, the line is 3.5, and I'd anticipate this being probably a 3-point or less game. So I would definitely, even if I would take the spread on that. And I'm going to take Tennessee to win outright anyway. So definitely a very good line, though. Steelers over the Jets, and this was another game that I debated quite a bit. The line is 7. I think that the Steelers are going to kill the Jets because their secondary is terrible. I mean, Revis isn't nearly as bad as he was week 1. He wasn't even that bad week 2. He had a couple bad plays. That's a lot of that's on the coaching staff, though, because every time you put somebody, Revis isn't a shutdown corner anymore. That's obvious. That's not. I'm not lighting the war. I'm not not really a scorching hot take to say that Revis isn't nearly as good as he was even 2 years ago when he was in Tampa Bay. He was actually pretty good, but he's not as good as he used to be, and you can't really have a corner in one-on-one coverage against a top wide receiver in the league, which AJ Green has definitely played like one this year. Even if you don't consider him one of the 5 best receivers in the league, he's definitely put up the numbers. You got to have a safety over the top, and that playing cover O on an elite receiver is never going to work out well unless you have I don't even know who's really a shutdown man-to-man corner. I guess Chris Harris, but outside of that, really, there's not really any guy I would take and say, hey, go cover this guy right now. You're going to shut him down. I don't think there's any of those in the league at this point. Maybe the Broncos guys, but so the Jets have no secondary. But the thing that really sways this is the Steelers have lost one time this year. The one time they lost was to the not the Kansas City Chiefs. They killed the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm gonna tell you the difference between the Philadelphia Eagles and the other 3 teams they played. The other 3 teams they played are Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Washington, and they beat all of them. The one team that they've lost to is the Philadelphia Eagles. You know the difference between those teams? Philadelphia has a pass rush. The other 3 don't. Well, Philadelphia has a really good pass rush. The other 3 don't have a very good pass rush. And that can make all the difference in this game. But like we saw last week against Seattle, the Jets don't really, just because they have an advantage over the line doesn't mean that this is necessarily going to make a difference. Now, the one thing is, last week Russell Wilson got rid of the ball very quick because the Jets don't have a good secondary. I picture a lot of that happening this week too. So I don't know if necessarily the line, the Steelers line, is going to come into play against the Jets defensive line, which is better. There's no debate about that. The Jets defensive line is maybe the best defensive line in the league. It's at least in the conversation. I'm trying to think of other teams off the top of my head, but there's not really one that has 4 solid. There's 3 or 4 solid positions just through and through. Maybe the Rams, but definitely going to take the Steelers in this one. The 7-point spread definitely could come into play with a late touchdown for the Jets. I don't think this game's going to be close. I don't even know if I'm going to bother watching this game after the second half if it's more than a 2-score game, because if the Jets are down 14, they're losing. That's just the nature of it. So, moving on, Raiders over Chargers. I struggle with this game a little bit too because I wanted to take the Chargers because I think the Raiders have been playing a little bit above their heads. They played not very good against the Titans 2 weeks ago. And the game against the Ravens really could have gone either way, too. Oakland doesn't have a win this year that has really convinced me that they're a great team. And they obviously have, great players, but they have not won a game by more than 1 score all year. They have not lost a game by more than 1 score because they lost by a touchdown to Atlanta, too. But they beat Tennessee by 7, they beat Baltimore by 1, and they beat New Orleans by 1. So I wanted to take the Chargers in this game. But at the same time, the Chargers have just been blowing a lot of late games lately. And this is going to be the one time that they actually have a lead and they can get a stop at the end of the game, or they come back with 20 seconds left and don't screw up. This will be the one time, just because I'm picking against them, that they'll come back. I'm going to have a 0-16 record picking Chargers games this year. But I guarantee it. But I'm going to take the Raiders in this one. And the line on this one, I accidentally closed the NFL. games. The line on this one right now is 3.5. I think San Diego's going to cover this. I think this is a very close game. All right, moving on to cross-conference action. I need another drink really quick, so just hold on. We got the Bears and the Colts, and the Bears did win against the Detroit Lions last week, but I'm still going to take the Colts in this one. Line's 4.5. I think that the Bears don't cover that one. I think the Bears just got in a really good situation last week playing against Detroit, where Detroit's receivers have dropped a lot of passes, and Stafford's clearly been frustrated with that. Detroit just has been a super inconsistent team this year. Their defense isn't as strong as it has been in past seasons. I don't really know if it was particularly great last year, but it hasn't been as good this year. So I think that the Bears beating them with the people that they have isn't very good. And I also think that Brian Hoyer's due for a game where he just doesn't play as well. Maybe it's not against the Colts defense, but I don't know really if this is going to turn into a shootout. It's going to be a high-scoring game, and the 4.5 line does scare me because I don't think that Indy should really be favored over anybody by more than 3 points. But if they should, it's definitely the Bears. I'm going to take the Colts in this one. This is really a throwaway game. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I don't really care. We got the Ravens and the Redskins, and I don't really know if you'd consider this the Beltway series, but in baseball, when the Baltimore Orioles play the Washington Nationals, they call it the Beltway series. So this is like the same thing. The Redskins are playing the Ravens, which is something that only happens every 4 years in baseball. It happens every year. I'm going to take Baltimore in this one. I wanted to take Washington, but really just looking at it, Washington's defense is terrible. And I think if any defense in the league is prone to giving up the same kind, the kind of plays that the Ravens are really good at, deep passes, running 4 verticals basically, the Madden play, running vertical lines and just throwing down the field. Washington doesn't really have a pass rush, at least not this year. Like Ryan Kerrigan's usually good. I don't even know if he's playing this year. I haven't really heard much about him, but Ryan Kerrigan's usually good. But outside of him, like they don't really have any other great pass rushers. And the Ravens, if they have time to let plays develop down the field, especially against Washington's corners, I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. The line's 3.5. I don't think Washington covers. But I can see a scenario where they win somehow. Now the Texans taking on the Vikings, and the Houston Texans have really just drawn a not good schedule lately. They play this is their schedule so far this year. They played New England week 3. They're going to play Minnesota this week, and then week 7 they play Denver. So rough stretch. They did get Tennessee and Indianapolis in there. That's 3 very rough games. And then toward the end of the season, it gets pretty competitive again as well because they actually play the AFC West this year in what might be a great finish for the AFC West. There might be 3 playoff teams, but they already played Kansas City, but they're playing Minnesota this week. I think the Vikings are the best team in the league, at least in the NFC. The Broncos might give them a run for their money too, but I think that the Vikings are the best team in the league, and until they show a reason for me not to pick them, I think that it's wise to just say that the Vikings are going to win every game because their defense is just great. Like, this is the same kind of situation as the Denver Broncos were in last year, but the difference is Sam Bradford's actually a competent quarterback. Not great, not even really good, but competent. He's just as good as Teddy Bridgewater, and better than whoever the Broncos tried it out last year because Brock Osweiler doesn't look very good and Peyton Manning was not good. I can tell you that for sure. So I'm going to be taking Minnesota in this one. The line's 6.5. I can see Houston covering, but I think it'll be a 1-score game, meaning a touchdown. So the Broncos and the Falcons. What the Falcons have been doing early on this year that's made them so successful is they've just been passing all over these really bad secondaries. Take a look at the teams they've beaten. They lost to Tampa Bay, who also don't have a very good secondary, but they played against Oakland, who have no corners, New Orleans, who also have no corners because Delvin Breaux just went down, and Carolina, who's starting 2 rookie corners. So they're going to go up against Bradley Roby, Aqib Talib, and Chris Harris this week. I don't think they're going to have nearly as much success passing the ball as they have early on. Now, Matt Ryan is probably the front runner for MVP if you look at the statistics, but I think this is going to be a rough week for him in Denver against 3 shutdown corners. Julio's still probably going to get his numbers, but I don't think the offense as a whole, well, I don't think he's going to get 300 yards. again this week, especially not in Denver. But I think Denver's going to win this one. I don't think it's really that close of a contest. Line 6, I do not see a scenario in my mind where Atlanta covers that, unless it's because it's like a 17 to 13 game or 17 to 14, and Denver just wins with their defense, but they don't really do a whole lot offensively. And Denver even showed last week, like, I don't think it matters what quarterback they have. And Paxton Lynch looked pretty good, from what I saw anyway. I'm gonna look at his stats again really quick. Yeah, they beat the Bucs 27-7. I actually was going to go to that game. Yeah, he didn't look too bad. 7 yards per attempt, 14 for 24. That's not bad stats. I don't think he looks that bad. But, all right. We're going to move on to the Bengals. Oh, I forgot to do the Thursday night game first. I'll do that at the end, I guess. I didn't even think about that. But let's do Bengals Cowboys. The line is a pick, so there really is no covering spreads in this one. Dallas 3-1, Cincy 2-2. I'm going with Cincinnati in this one because I think that a lot of the Dallas 3-1 probably should be 4-0. Honestly, they should have beaten the Giants week 1, if not for the stupid play by Terrence Williams. They probably would have, but they played a cake schedule pretty much so far this year. They played in consecutive weeks Washington, Chicago, and San Francisco. Which, if any team played them, they probably would have won all 3 of those games, or at least 2. They didn't really win any of them convincingly. Maybe the Chicago game, because I think they were up like 17-0 at halftime, or no, they were. I'm sorry, it was like 24-3, and then Chicago scored 2 touchdowns in the second half. Well, Dallas didn't really do a whole lot. Dak Prescott looks very good, at least above average, I would say. But at the same time, I think Cincinnati is really gunning for another win. They have to win at this point to really stay competitive with these other AFC North teams. And the Cowboys have looked pretty decent, but I think this is their first real test all season. So I want to take I'm going to take the Bengals in this one. Bills Rams, a game that I had a tough time picking. I think this one is another one that could go either way, but I am going to take the Rams in this one for really no actual reason other than they're at home. That's like literally the only reason that I even picked this. Also, they're favored by 2.5. I don't think Buffalo's going to cover that. I think it'll be a 3-point game. Although it could absolutely be less than that. But the Rams defense is really good. The Buffalo's offensive line is missing a couple key pieces. I could see this being the week where Buffalo kind of finally comes back down to earth. I also think their defense has been playing a little bit above their head. And it might be the same situation as last week where they beat Jacoby Brissett. Case Keenum's kind of the same. He's just throwing a lot of short passes, trying to get not very much yardage, and seeing if his players can do anything after the catch. They're not trying to test him too much, but I'm going to take the Rams in this one. There's really no reason. It's kind of just a toss-up for me. This is probably the game that really should have been the pick. And how about that? The 4-1 St. Louis Rams. And I forgot to mention also, it looks like this week's bye teams are the Seahawks and there's got to be another one. The Seahawks, the Saints are off this week. It looks like too. Are there only 2 bye week teams this week? Yeah, it looks like there's only 2 bye teams. So the Seahawks and the Saints. Seahawks, pretty good look so far this year for them. And the Saints probably needed a bye too. But just because then that means they can't lose. All right, so we'll talk about the Eagles-Lions game, and then we'll move on to the primetime games since I saved it for this long anyway. So Eagles-Lions, this is another 1 o'clock game. I probably should have. I did these in order last week, and then I forgot all about that this week. Eagles-Lions, I'm taking the Eagles in this one. Eagles look really good. The Lions have not looked very good so far this year. Their one victory wasn't a very convincing one, I don't believe. I think it was they beat Indy in week 1, yeah, and they almost lost. Indy came back within like the final 2 minutes of the game after Detroit was up 21-10 or something, 21-3 at some point. But that was their one win, and they needed like a late comeback against a bad defense for that. Detroit's another case where they have lost 4. They've played in 4 close games. But the one game that they lost at Green Bay, they were down 34-3 at half. No, they were down 31-10 at half, and then they came back in the second half and scored 17 points. But that was a game where the score looked a lot closer than the game actually was. And the Lions haven't looked very good. They've blown a lot of close games. I don't think Jim Caldwell is a very good coach. The Philadelphia Eagles have been probably the biggest surprise of this year. Carson Wentz obviously looks very good. They are not only the top offense scoring in the league, but they're the best scoring defense in the league. So that's always a good combination and usually a sign that a team is actually playing like really well all around. The thing is, they did beat Pittsburgh, but their other two victories are against Cleveland and Chicago, who I'd bet if I had to pay money or if I had to like make a bet on this, I would say those two teams are in the top 5 or even top 3 of the draft. But well, definitely Cleveland, because either way they would have. Well, no, the Rams might actually be good this year, but well, good in terms of I don't think their team is good, but they might perform well. So they do have that win over Pittsburgh. They haven't played a lot of other quality opponents. I think the Eagles train keeps rolling this week. I think they're good. They have not played a division game yet, though, so that'll be interesting when that rolls around. All right, let's talk about the Thursday night game. There's not really much to say about this. Let me get another drink. Cardinals taking on the 49ers. I don't think there's any way the Cardinals go 1-4 to start out the year, and the 49ers have been actually a lot better than expected performance-wise. They hung in with the Panthers. I don't want to say they kept it close with the Panthers. They didn't really keep it close, but they hung in with the Panthers. It was a game they weren't really out of at any point, even though they were down they were down quite a bit. They play really good against LA week 1, and they lost handily to Seattle. They can score though. They scored 28 points week 1, 27 week 2. They scored 18 and 17 aren't very good totals, but they're still better than some of the more anemic offenses I've seen in my lifetime. So I think the Cardinals are going to win this one, though. I think this is going to be like week 2 against Tampa, which is consistently looking more and more like a worse loss for Tampa with each game that the Cardinals play. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Sunday night game, Packers-Giants. I don't think this game could be less interesting. I don't think that the Giants are very good. They were good for a couple weeks, but I don't think they're very good. And they keep going up against these teams that are just better than them. Like, it's unfortunate. They don't really have a lot of games. Unfortunately, the NFC East is really good this year. There's 4 good teams in the NFC East. It'll be very interesting to see if an NFC East team could get a wild card. As it currently stands, they wouldn't, but I think that the Cowboys are at least going to be in the discussion, and the Redskins maybe even too. Never count them out, even though they're not a very good team. So the Giants have so far, they played Dallas and won by 1 point, a game they should not have won. New Orleans and won by 3, a game they probably should not have won. Washington, a game they should not have lost. And Minnesota, a game that was not competitive. So they've had 4 very strange games to start. Well, 3 very strange games to start out the year. They beat the team they probably shouldn't have, but they also lost to a team they absolutely should have beat. Their schedule is gonna lighten up in a bit, but the next 4 games they play, actually 5. 5 games. The next 5 games they play, plus the game they just played, are all against potential playoff teams, or at least teams that are in playoff position right now. They played Minnesota last night, or the other night. Monday. Today's Wednesday when I'm recording this. They played Green Bay Sunday night, this game I'm predicting right now. They play Baltimore, at LA, home for Philadelphia, and home for Cincinnati. That's a tough schedule. I don't think the Giants are going to make the playoffs this year. I don't think they're going to win this game. I don't know if they're going to win any of those games. So I'm taking the Packers in this one, but hopefully the not poor, but yeah, I'm going to say they're not a very good defense. Hopefully the poor Packers defense keeps the Giants in this one, and maybe Odell will figure out how to not be a total jackass. All right, so Panthers hosting the Buccaneers. Again, I don't think this game's going to be very close. I refuse to buy into the poor performances of Carolina this week. The game's at home, but the game's at home this week, and I think that might pose a problem in terms of off the field, everything that's been going on in that city lately. I just think they've had a rough start of things. They didn't really play against San Francisco. Their defense hasn't been as good. Their scoring defense hasn't been as good this year. They gave up 21 points in the opener, 27 in their second game, their only win, 22 against Minnesota, and then they gave up 48 last week. They just haven't been able to get stops, it seems. So it's something to watch as the season progresses to see if their defense plays any better. But their next few games they're just really have gone through the gauntlet this year. They played Denver and Minnesota and Atlanta, all of whom are in playoff spots right now. They play Tampa Bay this week. They play New Orleans next week, who always have a good offense. Then they play Arizona, LA, Kansas City. They play New Orleans again. And then after that, they play Oakland, Seattle, San Diego, Washington, Atlanta, and Tampa Bay. Not an easy schedule for the Panthers this year. It's very conceivable that they'll miss the playoffs, but I think they're going to beat the Buccaneers. Buccaneers aren't very good. And a lot of people thought they were going to be this year, but their defense is just terrible. Their defense is not any better than it was last year. It doesn't seem anyway. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think is going to happen in Week 5, and let me know what you think of my picks. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.